Hey guys, it's Payne. I'm really excited to introduce a brand new show to Bet the Board that combines sports and alternative investing, the very first of its kind. Sports betting and collectibles converging is inevitable. Let me tell you why. Sports cards and memorabilia are another way to get money into the market and do it without limit restrictions or the substantial hold you're accustomed to with sports betting. Whether you collected cards as a kid and are looking to get back into the hobby, this podcast is for you. If you've been collecting cards for years, this podcast will make you think and operate more efficiently. Are you in real estate? The parallels to investing in sports cards and memorabilia are uncanny. You're on Wall Street. Well, listen close. The best sports cards have outperformed the S&P 500 by 6x since 2013. And during the 2008 market crash, sports cards held up better than the S&P 500. Bet the Board, in conjunction with PWCC, presents CardBoard Chat, an entertaining, sophisticated, and informative podcast that combines sports, analytics, betting, cards, and memorabilia. Without further ado, this is CardBoard Chat with Jesse Craig, a leading figure in the collectible space, and me, Payne. We've been talking about doing a podcast since 2019. It's about damn time we figured this thing out.
Yeah. Hey, we're here now, and that's all that matters.
Short and sweet, right?
That's
to
it.
The point.
That's it. You know, this is something I want to do with you for a long time and kind of bring our two backgrounds together. And so I'm super excited to be here and finally get this thing recorded.
If you're an avid listener of Bet the Board, you know who I am. If you're stumbling into our podcast feed listening for the first time because of CardBoard Chat, I'm Payne, professional sports bettor since 2004. But the real star of the show is the man you just heard. He is one of the most important figures in the sports card and collectible industry. The man is responsible for some of the largest alternative assets changing hands, massive 7-figure pieces. Jesse Craig, how goes it?
It's good. That's maybe the most kind introduction I've ever had. I'll take it.
And I don't usually treat you that way.
You don't. We have, look, for those who are used to listening to Bet the Board and have heard some of the banter back and forth between Payne and Todd, well, I can assure you there will be even more banter in this podcast because we love to bust each other's balls. We have a good time.
I think that's a good starting point. How we met, how we finally introduced. I'm going to let you start that story because I don't necessarily feel comfortable starting a story about a bunch of men half naked in water.
Whoa, easy. Okay, so it's a little bit more simple than that. But so it's funny how our worlds did collide, though, because I was on vacation with my wife for our 10-year anniversary in Barbados. We were at a sandals resort, which we like to go to because it's just simple. And so we're laying there by the pool, we're soaking in the rays, and there was a couple of dudes, to your point, half naked in the pool wearing the swimsuits, chatting about sports. And I kind of overheard them, and sitting there with a margarita in hand, I kind of interjected and had a few comments about a few things and asked them what they did for a living. And one of those gentlemen happened to be Todd Furnham. So Todd mentioned he was in the gambling space, and we started talking. He asked what I did. I said I'm in the trading card industry. And Todd said, "Oh, that's really interesting. One of my good friends is a big Jeter collector." And I said, "Okay, what's his name?" And he's like, "Well, he's very secretive." So I'll introduce you guys later. Like that's how it went. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, what are we talking about here? So, we actually ended up hanging out the majority of the time. He was there with, at the time, his girlfriend Nicole and a good friend of his and his wife. And so the our three couples hung out quite a bit for the next week or so while we were there. And we stayed in touch after. And sure enough, he introduced the two of us together. I come to find out that you've been avid in this space for a while, and you are indeed the Jeter collector that you lived up to be. I mean, he nailed it on the head. You are Mr. Jeter.
We had an initial conversation. It was you, me, and Brent, and it went very well. You were a little bit quiet, and
Brent likes to do a lot of the talking. If Brent's on the horn, he commands a lot of the audio.
The first conversation we had was about blue chips, cards, and all of these things. And we all had a debate on our very first call about what Peyton Manning card was the best asset to own. And I stand by the 1998 Topps Chrome Refractor. You guys believe it's the SP. We need to get this blue chips trading card portfolio thing updated by Brent. What's going on with that?
Well, I mean, we do have our indices that our indices get updated every quarter. So if you go on to our website, you can look. We're the first people to ever create indices based around trading cards and historical sales. So on our website, pwccmarketplace.com, it's got it all laid out there. But yeah, blue chips are historically more vintage. Peyton is right on that cusp of, what do you consider a less risky investment from a trading card perspective? Because if that person, I'm just going to call it what it is, if that person's still alive, they can still do something to affect the value of their asset. Right. It's just what it is. Whether it's someone who's not playing like Michael Jordan, he could still come out and, God forbid he's a wife beater or, whatever it may be. But that can affect the value, because with these trading cards follow brands, and brands are really important in investing. And I'm sure we'll go down that rabbit hole down the road, but it's a big part of buying and selling trading cards.
Absolutely. And one thing, we're all passionate about cards and collectibles for our own unique reasons. Let's kind of transition back just a touch. It kind of allows people to get into this space for different reasons. They either bring us back to our childhood. It allows us to meet new people like us, make a few bucks on the side, whatever it is. I got back into the space in late 2015 after collecting cards as a kid. Jesse, how did you get reintroduced to the space, and what was the time frame of that?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I'm 38. I'm like a lot of people that collected as kids with their parents during what we call the junk wax era of the 80s and early 90s, where it was just mass manufacturing, right? There's just tons of quantities of the assets. And so there's very few cards from the 80s that are worth much money. And most of the time, if they're worth a lot of money, it's because they're in perfect condition. They've been graded a PSA 9 or a PSA 10, or, back in 95, or, a high grade from one of the top tier grading companies. So for me, I got back into the space. I actually had a neighbor of mine who was a dealer in the space, and I didn't know it until we started chatting. I got a business degree from University of Oregon, go Ducks, and I was working for a lighting company at the time doing marketing. And he's like, "Hey man, I really need some help. Can you come on and do operations for me? I will match whatever you're making at this marketing company." And I'm like, "You're gonna pay me what they're paying me to do trading cards?" I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." So that was it. I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'll put in my notice now. I'm out." So I got in. I started learning a lot. I did operations for 3 or 4 years. This is like 2009, 2010, and then my wife and I had our daughter. I wanted a little bit of change of pace, kind of do something on my own. So I actually got into real estate here in Oregon, where I'm born and raised, and did real estate for about 4 years. And then the company PWCC that I'm at now and a minority owner of, they moved up from the Bay Area in 2016. And I knew Brent Higgins very well because, we used to sell some cards through him. And so I knew him from that relationship. And I reached out to Brent to wish him a happy birthday, one Cinco de Mayo, which is his birthday. And he's like, "Hey, I was just thinking about you. I've got an opportunity for you. We should grab a beer." And so one thing led to another, and he made me an offer I guess I couldn't turn down. I left real estate in late 2018 to get back into trading cards with PWCC.
That's an awesome story. Let me ask you this. You remember your first card you ever purchased?
Yes, I do. It was a Yaz rookie, 1960 Topps, Carl Yastrzemski rookie. I'm a Sox fan.
Remember what you paid for it?
What's that?
Remember what you paid for it back then?
I traded. This is when I was 8 years old. I traded my neighbor who... this is the reason I'm a Red Sox fan. I moved from Oregon City, Oregon to Tualatin, Oregon when I was 7. And my neighbor across the street was from was from Boston. His mom divorced his father and moved as far away as she possibly could from Boston to Oregon. And so he was a huge Red Sox fan. And he had multiple Yaz rookies at the time. And so I traded him some candy for a Yaz rookie.
I was 8 years old. Made out well. You've made out well.
Yeah.
This is how it's transitioned over time. Made out well in the card space. I think it was important to give a little background about myself, you, obviously, the preceding shows are going to be a little bit more specific about cards and players. It's going to be informational. It's going to be actionable. It's going to be entertaining. We have 4 great segments to talk about some of the most iconic players and the most prestigious assets this space has. Let's get started.
Let's go, let's go, let's go. It's time, folks. That's right. We're going to discuss undervalued and overvalued cards, or maybe even some memorabilia assets, potentially some players. Is it time to buy, sell, or hold on to these assets or players? We'll give you some opinions and back it up.
So this segment, as you heard, is called It's Time. We're looking at players that might be a little bit overvalued, players that could be undervalued, particular cards that might be of interest. What's the first one that you're looking at, Jesse, that might be a buy for you?
So I'm going to talk player as a whole. His stuff has gone up a ton his rookie year. It leveled off his sophomore year, and then he was out most of last year, and so that obviously affected the value of his assets. But I'm talking about Zion Williamson. Now, I get it. The guy's a tank. He's potentially injury prone. But has anybody seen the pictures of him in the last week or two and how much better shape he looks like than he was previously in 2021? I mean, he looks incredible.
He looks
absolutely incredible. So when I'm looking at a
money
player
will
like
do
Zion,
that. Money
I know
will
that
do
there's question marks around his health. But I have these metrics that I think of when I invest in players. One, do they have a good brand, right? I mentioned brand earlier. Brand's a big, big, big deal. He's got a good brand. He's a nice kid. He's pretty humble. He's fairly well spoken, and he hasn't done anything in since he's been in the NBA to make someone not really like him, except for getting injured. So I look at brand and how important that is, and then it's almost like the eye test, right? So when I watch NBA basketball, I like to watch stars. So there's a handful of guys, if they're playing and that game's on TV, I got to watch it. It's the likes of LeBron, Luka, Steph, and guess what? Zion is one of those guys. He's one of the most exciting players in the NBA to watch. And if you think about how, I just saw an article that came out recently talking about how dominant he's been in scrimmages for the Pelicans. Yep. You look at the team made a good run last year. They got the 8th seed with CJ, with Brandon Ingram, Valanciunas. The fact that they now have a healthy Zion, perceived to be healthy, coming back, there's going to be some question marks around his cards. So I look at Zion as a buy right now. I don't think there's as much downside as there was, let's say, a couple of years ago. And I think there's a lot of upside when you look at, what John Morant stuff's going for, what Luka's stuff's going for. I mean, he's one of the most exciting players in the NBA, and he has the opportunity to potentially lead the league in scoring with how easy he can get buckets.
I won't argue with buying Zion short term. I think the thought process is there, especially when you mention the brand in the situation, right, is improving with the players around him. I think a worst case scenario would seem like it's a buy today and likely you're profiting in a couple months of, into the season.
Sure. Even
if you're someone that doesn't like the variance of dealing with some of those health and longevity concerns, losing weight to me is huge. And it's not just the appearance factor, right? It's a sign of maturity and growth. And that's, I think, sometimes what we don't realize when we start assessing these kids. They're 19 and 20. I don't even want to tell you what I was doing at 19 and 20. So
let's not get into that.
I think that's interesting. And when Zion's been available, to your point, he's been dominant. He even had weight concerns when he was dominant, right? His player efficiency rating, 26.3. An average player is 15. And for context, I know you'll hate this because you're a big Kobe guy. Kobe's career-long player efficiency rating was 23. Obviously not comparing Zion to Kobe, just providing that context to tell you how well...
Why you got to do Kobe like that?
It just shows how well he played even when he wasn't in shape. Now, I will say this. I went to the Dallas show in May, was in AC for the National in July, August. Those were times where I was hearing more of the sophisticated buyers talk about purchasing Zion assets. But what's really interesting to me, and you kind of touched on it at the top a little bit, and it's something you have to factor. with all of the outside happenings with markets in our country, and I look at Zion's asset index, it's down 24% the last 3 months. That's more telling to me maybe when people need money, they're willing to sell less stable players?
Sure. That makes a ton of sense. I mean, you think about the risk that's also involved in some of these younger athletes, right? They haven't proven themselves, so you are betting on their futures. It's a way to be invested in this guy stepping on the court every single time he plays. Instead of betting on an individual game per se, you can have a portfolio of Zion cards, and now you're invested in him. Sometimes, depending on the sport, and we'll probably get into this later as well, but each sport's a little bit different as far as wins and losses and how it affects their trading card values. And basketball is definitely one of those sports where wins matter. You got to get championships. That really affects the value of your trading cards. So this is why Luka's stuff is so high so early. Well, first of all, he's Luka. But Luka also seems to be one of those guys that has won throughout his entire life, being the EuroLeague MVP at 16, winning a EuroLeague championship. Coming into this year, Luka is looking in great shape and didn't take a bunch of time off. So it's one of those things where you might buy Zion now, and if he comes out red hot and the team looks really good and you want to take your profit, sell it.
Yep.
Or if you believe in him long term, hang on to it. Now, with these younger guys, obviously it's much riskier, right? You talk about the Peyton Mannings, the Tom Bradys, the LeBron James, the Michael Jordans, guys that have done it, their legacies well cemented. Those are less risky. You talk about guys that are dead, those are even less risky, right? You're going to get much more steady ROI there. But, when we talk about trading cards, we talk about investing, an investment portfolio or a portfolio of trading cards. And you need to look at, what kind of risk profile you want in that, just like you would any, stock portfolio. It's the same kind of thing. So I like a good mix. I like a mix of vintage stuff, kind of, mid-vintage, we'll call it 80s and 90s. And then stuff that might be a little bit more risky, but you can have a little bit more fun with and be invested in that guy when he steps on the court or the field.
That's a great conversation, and I know it wasn't meant to be had now, but you led me into it, and I don't want to put you on the spot. You talked about that portfolio, and I think you perfectly hit it in that you do want some long shots in there as a small sector of that portfolio. Would you kind of say that maybe 10 to 15% speculative on some of these modern day players is the right combination, or what do you think is the right combination? I know you have a lot of the data. You speak to a lot of the largest collectors in the world. What does that look like in terms of percentage of portfolio on some of these modern day players?
Well, I think it really depends on the individual investor or collector. I don't think that there is
risk tolerance.
Yeah, exactly. There's not a number where you can point to and go, yes, that is it. And everyone's going to have their opinion. For me, I'm more risk adverse, so I would lean towards the 10%. I might buy some guys that are a little bit more risky. I can have a little bit more fun, be a little active. Because look, whether this is an investment or a hobby, it can really be both. And that's what I treat it as. I get to have fun in my spare time. Like I was on a Jalen Hurts kick 2 years ago. Or a year ago, whatever it was, a year ago. I was buying all sorts of Jalen Hurts cards because I thought he was going to be the next best thing. And unfortunately, I sold them all too early because now he's playing out of his mind. But I made money on him, and that was fine with me. And I don't look back, right? Like if I buy something, and whether I lose money or make money, I don't look back and I keep moving forward because it was all an educated decision when I made the purchase. But I also have an exit in mind when I make that purchase.
Yep. You mentioned Jalen Hurts obviously playing out of his mind, great offensive line, added weapons, looks like he's more accurate. From one quarterback that's absolutely on fire right now to another, let's talk about Tua. Is this a guy you were buying or selling?
I'm selling Tua. I know that might hurt your soul, Mr. Miami. But let me tell you, from an eye test perspective that we talked about, he's got a weird throwing motion in my opinion. It reminds me a little bit of, look, not Cam Newton Prime, because Cam Newton Prime was an absolute stud as much as I'm not a Cam Newton fan. But his throwing motion just looks off to me. I don't know what it is, but this is
because he's left-handed.
Sure. Call it that. I don't think that's what it is, but sure, call it he's lefty. I think Phil Mickelson has a great golf swing, and he's left-handed. So, look, we're talking about 3 games, 3 or 4 games into the season. The guy hasn't done anything, in my opinion. And everybody was writing him off, and now everyone's trying to ride the wave and maybe buy Tua and think the Dolphins are going to be, the next best thing since sliced bread. You've got, Rick Ross and Jake Paul, throwing $1 million bet down on Miami to win the Super Bowl. Tua, in my opinion, this year is equivalent to what Kyler Murray was last year. Hot start, gonna fizzle.
I think it's interesting, right? And kind of keeping this within the right context, because virtually any modern day quarterback you sell is going to be the right move when you zoom out 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. I mean, you just look at Aaron Rodgers' prices, and his accomplishments far outweigh Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, and the man we're discussing now in Tua. But here's what's interesting to me. Current day sell, I wouldn't necessarily disagree, but this is coming from someone that bet the Miami Dolphins over 8.5 wins this season, because I knew what Mike McDaniel would mean to the Dolphins offense. I think we all know what Tyreek Hill is, and when you pair Mike McDaniel with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle and look at his history, he was the 49ers offensive coordinator. It was a 49ers offense with Jimmy G last year that led the league in yak. And so when you have an accurate quarterback like Tua who throws on time in an offense designed for guys to be wide open and run after the catch, Tua fits this quite well. Right now, he's top 5 in EPA per pass attempt. But to your point, I think Miami's record could be different right now when you just think about some of those early games, right? I mean, they were down 21 in the fourth quarter on the road at Baltimore. They were outgained by Buffalo by 285 yards. We wouldn't have some of this hype if the Dolphins were started the season 1-2.
That's very true, and I forget that I'm talking to a stat magician here. So way to pull out some of those yak stats. Look, it is true. If the Dolphins are 1-2, we're probably not having this conversation. But they're 3-0. They are. Look, they shouldn't have won that game against the Bills. Let's just call it what it is. I mean, every single statistic you can imagine was against them in that game, and yet they still found a way to win. So, yes, that's impressive. This is, on my part, this is more of an eye test for me, an overreaction early on in a season. This is where I am at best neutral on Tua. But I would say that based on some of the pricing I've seen on his cards the last 2 weeks, he's overpriced.
You just pulled your best Bob Barker, Happy Gilmore impression and told us that you think the price is wrong, bitch, on Tua. This is a perfect segue to next.
Can we change this segment to the price is wrong, bitch? Instead of it's time, I think we have a new segment title.
So this next one we are going to call Magic Number.
Pick a number, any number, whatever it may be. We got a number inside, but we want a magic number. All right. This is where we're going to pick a few big cards that enter in an auction over the next couple of days. And we're going to try and guess how much they sell for in advance. Throw out a number. We got one too.
Okay. There's 3 cards that are coming up for auction at PWCC. Jesse, I'm going to introduce them to you. We're both going to give our best estimate on where we think they are going to end price-wise, because you are the expert, because you are the guy with all of the data in the sports card world. I think it's only fair if I introduce them, you go first, and maybe I try to prices right this thing and just go $1 above or below.
Of course you would try to do that, because you're going to have a monster advantage then.
I'm not going to do that, but that would have been the strategic play here. But the first card we're talking about is a 2012 Kobe National Treasures NBA Game Gear Trios Auto. It's a game-worn card. It's National Treasures, 3 different patch windows with each having 3 different color game-worn jerseys. It's in gem mint condition. Basketball season is obviously approaching. Where do you think that card's going to end in the next auction?
Well, and for those listening to this that don't know what that means for a card, when you talk about a 3-color patch, it can make the difference in double the value in a card when you have a patch that is game used and there's multiple colors from the jersey within that. So it's not what we call a napkin patch. It's not a single color. It really helps the value of that asset. So yeah, this card itself, It closes on Sunday. What day is that? Sunday the 9th. Close on Sunday the 9th.
At PWCC.
At PWCC, yep. It's in our weekly auction. I've got this card at $10,500.
Wow.
$10,500. Kobe stuff's interesting. I'm glad you brought him up earlier. I can't believe you just had him in the same sentence as Zion, but we'll leave that alone.
I mean, hey, if you really want to know, Dwayne Wade's player efficiency rating is better than Kobe's, but that's for another day.
God, please stop. And I love Dwayne Wade, but don't talk about my guy Kobe anymore, okay? we shouldn't let you talk about Kobe. So I'm guessing you're going to go under whatever number I throw out there, since you seem to be a Kobe hater. But no, I'm saying 10,500 is probably the number on this card. Like you mentioned, it's a Beckett 9.5, which is gem mint. It's an on-card auto, which carries more value than what would be some of the other cards have stickers on them. So they would send a player a sheet of stickers. They sign the stickers and they put those on the card. So on-card autos, because the player held the card, those always carry a premium as well. So I really like this card. I've got it at 10.5.
I'm going to guess, and you write down your number and we can come back to compare them in a later show. I'm going with $8,824. I don't want to say cheated, but I dug up some data, looked at what the card sold for last time, kind of getting a gauge of the market and Kobe's market in general. I think this one goes under 5 figures.
I think you're crazy.
Not the first time someone's told me that.
Trading cards and memorabilia have seen incredible growth as an alternative investment. The company leading the growth? PWCC Marketplace. PWCC Marketplace runs the largest weekly auction of authenticated sports cards, Pokemon cards, comic books, video games, and memorabilia in the world. PWCC Marketplace also has more than 65,000 items listed in their fixed price marketplace that you can make an offer on right now. Head over to pwccmarketplace.com and see why they're the best option for buying and selling trading cards, memorabilia, and all of your collectibles.
We're going to transition a little bit. We're going to go back to the NFL, a quarterback card, a guy who's absolutely on fire right now. 2018 Contenders rookie ticket stub, Lamar Jackson. It is the ball to chest variation. It's serial numbered out of 8. It has an on-card auto. It's a PSA 10 Pop 3. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is playing at an MVP level. Very dynamic passing. Even though he's put on a few pounds, he's rushing very efficiently. Top 5 in EPA per pass and completion percentage above expectation. Where do we think this rookie card ends?
I've got this at 7,500. This is a really cool. It's a Pop 3, so there's only 3 PSA 10s that exist, which is actually kind of high for a card that's numbered out of 8, and I think that affects the value a little bit. But with how good Lamar's playing, it's a contract year. I think everyone's betting on him to continue with this amazing play that he's had. And I've got this thing at $7,500. It's a really cool, aesthetically looking card. The top of the card has some ridges in it, kind of like an actual ticket. That's hence the Panini Contenders ticket. So cool piece. $7,500 is my number.
I'm going a little bit higher. I dug into what Lamar Jackson's been doing over the last 2 weeks. His prices have actually increased on some of his key rookie cards about 35% in the last 10 to 12 days. Let's see if that continues by the time this auction ends. I'm at $8,200 here.
You're 82. Okay, so we're pretty close. And
we're close.
Yeah, I think the next this is determined on because we're talking about a guy that's active, right? So if he comes out and plays well, it's probably going to get closer to your number. If he plays poorly, it'll probably be closer to mine.
Another football quarterback that is coming off a couple rough games. Mm-hmm. We're looking at the 2020 National Treasures Justin Herbert 4-color RPA to 99 in a BGS 910. I think we see a tiny dip over what your seller potentially envisioned when he was sending this to auction, right? Justin Herbert is dealing with a rib cartilage tear. That's far worse than broken ribs. The healing process can be anywhere from 1 to 3 months. Plus, you look at what's around him. Starting left tackle Rashawn Slater just tore his bicep. Corey Linsley, the Chargers starting center, and right tackle Trey Pipkins are battling injuries. Joey Bosa and J.C. Jackson, 2 of the key cogs on the defensive side of the ball, both injured. And the Chargers have an offensive coordinator right now in Joe Lombardi that doesn't design and offense that best suits Justin Herbert's skill set. And it just feels like every single year, this is supposed to be it for the Chargers. They're supposed to push forward. We saw it all these years with Phillip Rivers. It just never happens. It feels like the organization's cursed at this point. Where do we think this card ends?
My God, do you want the Chargers to hang it up right now?
I actually have, and I can't make this up. We didn't bet their over win total because of this, because they're a variance team. Instead, we said, hey, let's kind of hope that the positive spectrum of variance unfolds here. And we took them to win the Super Bowl at 20-1. That was a number that ended up closing before the season around 10-1. We felt good beating the market, but then the Chargers have just happened to start the season.
What was the over-under win losses this year?
It was at 9.5, and then it trended up a little bit higher, but you have to think about the AFC just absolutely being loaded with talent, especially in that division. Right?
Sure.
So that was the reason the win total was a little bit lower. We almost had this element where, if you think about basketball a few years back, where LeBron was the guy in the East and the West was just loaded, that's been a similar take to what we envisioned the NFL being, with the AFC just loaded with quarterbacks, the NFC being the much easier path. Even the top teams, right? You're looking at Tampa Bay struggling a little bit. The Packers don't quite look normal yet. So even the elite teams in the NFC aren't great. Slow start from San Francisco. Now you have your left tackle who's injured with a high ankle sprain. So even the top teams in the NFC, not that great right now.
Yeah, and look, it sounds like you have data overload on the Chargers. I actually want you to give us your value first on this card, and then I'll come in. How about that?
Okay.
How about we switch it up?
Yes. Here? So it's a 4-color patch. I did some digging. It looks like Herbert's market in the last 2 weeks is down about 15%. I saw a similar card that sold in the summer for around $54,000. It was only a 3-color patch. I understand it's football season, so we might see a little bit of a premium because of that. I'm actually going to come in a touch lower. I'm going to come in at $52,250 on this one. Okay.
And one thing you didn't mention, just I want to make sure that you saw this as well. It is what we call 0.5 away from a gem mint. So it has 2 9.5 subgrades and 2 9 subgrades, which does affect the value, because if you believe that the card is undergraded, then you can send it back into Beckett and have them review it. And if you get a 9.5, obviously it increases the value of the card. Okay. So you're going to be higher. You said 52?
I said 52,250.
I'm not going to lie. I'm actually going to be more conservative than you on this one.
Really?
Part of the reason for that is I've actually seen quite a few of these hit the market lately, and I think it's a little flooded with what we call Herbert RPAs, rookie patch autos. So I'm actually going to go 43,000.
Okay. I was actually,
43 is my number.
Before I started doing digging, I had 47 in my mind. I think you're going to be right, and this is not going to touch the 50s, but I think that's where I'm going to go. I said my number, 52,250. Let's see. It's not helping that I completely crapped on the man over the last couple of minutes either.
You really kind of shot yourself in the foot, to be honest with you.
The seller of that card is going to hate me for life if that sells for what you think it is.
He will block you on IG for sure.
Wouldn't be the first or the last time. Speaking of the last time, we're going to change gears a little bit, and we're going to go with a segment that we call Damn, That's a Ghost, because when it comes up for sale, it could be the last time you see it publicly available for a very long time.
Damn, that's a ghost. We're going to highlight a card that hasn't sold in more than a year right now, or is serial numbered to less than 100 copies produced. We're going to talk about why this card is significant, maybe in terms of hobbies or language or just the overall rarity of it all, and why it's considered a ghost.
Damn, that's a ghost. We look at cards here that do not sell frequently, are serial numbered to 100 or less, or they're just a rare grade, pop 2, 3, 4, something along those lines that make this card extraordinarily rare, that just does not become available very often. And the card we're talking about today is a Mike Trout Bowman Chrome Red Refractor numbered to 5, Jesse.
This card is an absolute monster. So I love Mike Trout. I mean, in my opinion, he is Captain America. If this guy didn't get injured, who knows what this guy could have done. I mean, his WAR is pretty ridiculous for a guy that's been injured as much as he has. And he's just an incredible baseball player. So for me, this card is going to finish probably over $1 million in the 1.5 range. It most recently sold 2 years ago for in the 900,000s. When it's all said and done, Mike Trout is going to be a top 10 player all time, in my opinion. He's probably going to be top 10 in WAR all time, joining the likes of Ruth and Cobb and Bonds and Mays and Aaron. And for those that, I know you have a lot of football listeners on here. So WAR it calculates not only your offensive efficiencies, but also defensive efficiencies for baseball. And to give you a little bit of an example, this is the staple card for any baseball player, any modern baseball player, is their Bowman Chrome autograph. There's versions out of 500, 199, 50, which is gold, 25 is orange, and the two most coveted are the out of 5, the red, and then the Superfractor, which is a 101. So there's only 5 of these that exist in the entire world, and last time we saw it was just over 2 years ago. Guess is you're not going to see one for a long time. And from a value perspective, Julio Rodriguez is a great young player out of Seattle. His red recently sold for $275,000. So if that gives you any idea of the potential this card has to do in the millions, it's pretty substantial.
This is one of those modern day baseball cards that I envision us talking about 35 years from now, like we do the 1952 Topps Mantle today.
Agreed.
And you hit it perfectly, right? The color refractor print run of the Trout is substantially shorter printed than that Mantle, right? Even if you combine the X-Fractor, the blue, the gold, the orange, the red, and the Superfractor. Here's my general thought, and I've wrestled with this in my mind for 2 years now. You mentioned Ruth and Mays and Aaron and Mantle, and I think one thing Trout has going for him is he is a modern day player where all of the 15 to 30-year-old guys got to see his peak, and we were in the largest card boom of like our time from 15 to 2021. And
I totally agree.
I think what's interesting here is we have at least a player in Ken Griffey Jr. that's a solid comp, because we could recognize he was the best player in baseball at his peak, even if there wasn't longevity. So I think that actually helps Trout's market, but I am starting to get a touch concerned about not reaching milestones. Is he going to sniff 3,000 hits?
I would imagine he does. I mean, he's over 1,000
right
year's 2009. His rookie year's 2009. So, the guy's 30, 31 years old. Pujols is playing in his 40s right now. And not that he's saying he's playing at a high level, but as long as, Mike Trout's back doesn't fall apart, which is no guarantee, right? Yeah. There's no guarantee of that. If he can have any kind of longevity in this league, he's going to hit 3,000 hits. His WAR is already similar to what Griffey's is. From an all-time perspective, I think they're like 80 on the list at the moment.
Yep.
And so when I look at a guy that's had, a lot of injuries, just like Ken Griffey Jr., the fact that he still has, let's call it 6 good years left, right? Yep. He could be, it might start the downward trend in his, mid to late 30s, but he's still got 6 good years left. The guy missed 40 games this year, and he's still, second in the AL in home run, or in home
38
runs?
I saw, yep.
It's insane. The guy, he could have hit 50 this year if he was healthy.
Yeah, so I think that is the milestone he'll reach. He will get 500 home runs, but to your point, right, missed 200 games the last 3 seasons. I think he eclipses the 100-game WAR mark for sure. He's up to 80, I saw. So I think you're spot on there, and collectors probably will have this mindset of, we know how good he was in his prime. The other element here, and I think it changes a little bit for baseball players, he's not going to win anything unless he gets out of California. I mean, he's playing for little brother right now. Correct. So,
which we all would love to see it, right? We'd all love to see him on a different team in a different market to actually let him win. Yep. It's pretty incredible how bad the Angels can be with how much talent they have. I mean, you literally have 2 of the best 3 players in all of baseball on your team, and you can't make the damn playoffs. It's kind of ridiculous. I thought when Madden went there, he was going to change the culture. They were going to start winning. They started off this year super hot and then got as cold as the Antarctic. I mean, they have been awful, absolutely awful. But look, you touched on it, and we mentioned it earlier. Baseball is one of those unique sports where, from a card perspective, you don't necessarily have to win to be worth a lot of money. It's different in football. It's different in basketball. But baseball, you kind of get a little bit of a pass because it is such a team-involved sport, and it's much more difficult for one person to take over a game than it is in basketball or football.
It's interesting to see that dynamic because there's so many other guys out there, right? You have a pitcher on the mound where you're potentially, never see the ball that inning. And then there is also this one-on-one element where you're up to bat and it's just you and the pitcher technically. So you do get a little bit of a pass for not winning. Although, some guys like Jeter, just natural born winners, doesn't matter.
Are we going to get a Jeter plug every single show we do? Is it going to happen?
I don't know.
We need like a running Jeter counter.
I was going to not divulge any of this information, but you were the one that said pre-show, like, hey, I got to mention that you're
the bag.
You're the Jeter
Cat's
guy.
Out the bag. Everybody, Mr. Cheater is Payne.
The bag. So the other interesting segment that we're going to do, and it's a guy that we've talked about on the football podcast frequently when I've kind of hinted that I have some investments in Patrick Mahomes. This is a segment that we are going to call This or That.
So we doing this or we doing that? You tell me and we'll tell you. We're going to compare two cards right now with similar value that are completely different. Let me give you an example. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you have a vintage Mickey Mantle baseball card worth $30,000. But you also have a modern day Joe Burrow rookie card worth $30,000. Which one would you rather have and why? You tell us, we're going to tell you right now.
So as the intro said there, we're going to compare two great cards and figure out which one we would prefer having. And Jesse, you came up with a great comparison here. One is on the ice. He is the GOAT, Wayne Gretzky. It is his 1979 OPC rookie card. And then, of course, the aforementioned Patrick Mahomes, his 2017 National Treasures RPA.
Yes. So, mentioned earlier that I'm more risk adverse. So doing these this or that's when they're modern versus vintage, I'm generally going to lean vintage. So just have that as a precursor here before we get into this. So looking at Gretzky. So it was 1979 OPC PSA 9. Last sale was about $140,000 for this card. There's only two PSA 10s that exist, so it is a very difficult card to find in very good condition. The OPC version is actually a Canadian production. There's also a Topps version made in the United States, also only a Pop 2, means population 2, PSA 10. There's been over 10,000 copies of the 1979 OPC Wayne Gretzky that have been graded, and only 91 have received PSA 9s, and then the two aforementioned PSA 10s. So the card is extremely condition sensitive, has a lot of print issues. Some of the edges can be kind of frayed, which is like a natural cut from the manufacturer, which I actually really like the look of that. He's the undisputed GOAT in his sport, and like I said, this card is about $140,000 card. In my mind, comparing this to a 2017 National Treasures Patrick Mahomes rookie patch auto, it's got a piece of the jersey on there. This specific card that we're looking at is what we call a two color. So it's got a lot of red and a little bit of yellow. On card auto, like we talked about, it's in a Beckett 9.5 gem mint. This card recently sold for about $130,000. So similar values. I love Mahomes. I'm a proponent for Mahomes. I think out of all the young quarterbacks in the league, if I'm going to put my money on anybody, it's him because he's actually done it, right? Been to 2 Super Bowls, a handful of AFC championships. He's won an MVP and a Super Bowl. So I love Mahomes. Football is more popular than hockey, right? So you have more potential buyers. But when you want to talk about being able to buy a rookie staple from the GOAT of a sport, I take that all day and twice on Sunday.
I'm shocked we agree, because our loyal listeners know that I'm a Mahomes guy, and I think you hit this perfectly in that he's already done it. Now it's just about compiling the stats, and it's crazy to see the perception of Mahomes shift a little bit as we gravitate towards the Justin Herberts, the Joe Burrows, the guys that haven't done it yet. And I think when you look at the roster that he has around him, he's already gone through the process of being on the rookie deal and stacking the roster, and he's won the Super Bowl, and he's got the MVP, and he's made it to the AFC Championship game every single year. And now the roster's turned over a little bit. They're rebuilding for the next push. All these other younger guys don't have their championship or MVP yet. But what's interesting to me about this, and I think you hit it perfectly, we both understand the growth potential the NFL has as Roger expands the sport international. It's against my religion to endorse an RPA that's not game used. So I, too, go with the Wayne Gretzky, and he is the GOAT of his respective sport. You mentioned the population. I mean, 91 PSA 10s, less than the print run of the Mahomes NT, just 2 PSA 10s. And I think we both know the way PSA is grading these days, those numbers are not likely to increase. But I think this is interesting, and we can kind of go one step further and maybe have something at least actionable for the listeners. It kind of makes me sick as, you know, we're operating in this space where non-game used items are selling for six figures. It's insane. You wonder, it's nuts. And you wonder why there's not stability in some of these sectors of the market. That's why. That's it.
It's we call it the Dick's Sporting Goods patch. It's, you know, on the back of some of these cards it says, you know, this patch is not from any specific event or game. And I buy and invest in game used patch cards only, on card autos only. I will, and look, some people love, you know, they don't mind sticker autos, they love sticker autos. Some people don't care about if the patch is game used or not. For me, it's like, I think the infamous photo that's floating around there is Mark Ingram, where he's at have you seen this, Payne? He's at a signing, and this is so they'll use the wording on the back of these cards sometimes and call it player worn. So it doesn't mean it's from a game. It can be an event, right? So there's this photo, you should Google it. It's hilarious. Mark Ingram has about what appears to be 25 jerseys on at one time stacked on top of him, so they can call those jerseys all player worn. It's ridiculous. So I'm 1,000% with you. I only invest in game use stuff now. The interesting thing to note here is that for 2017, for football, there are no rookie game used RPAs. Yep. Whether it's Flawless, National Treasures, the big popular brands in our market that carry a lot of value, none of them are. So if you do want to own a Mahomes RPA, rookie patch auto, whether it be, you know, one brand or the other, you're gonna have to own a player worn patch and not a game used patch. It's just unfortunately the way it is.
Yeah, and there are some instances where, and I should say this, any card that has a patch on it like you, it needs to be game used for me. Unfortunately, there are some one of ones, some logo mans out there that are game used but come with a sticker auto. You got to suck it up and go that route sometimes just to get the card. But I think what's interesting with the hobby is it feels like we had that crossover from basketball collectors that were just so used to exquisite basketball. And I love that set, and that set is far better than any new school NT. But that's what it feels like. We started comping out great exquisite basketball game used items, and because it looked the same even though it wasn't, that's why we've seen these prices. But it needs to change, and I think as buyers, until NT becomes game used, throwing out six figures on these items is ridiculous. But I will tell you this, if you really want to know the Patrick Mahomes rookie card that I think is wildly undervalued, and it's because the set is wildly undervaluable. We grew up, Jesse, kind of in the same time frame. The OG quarterback card was Contenders, right? It originated in 98. It was a crazy year. It was Peyton Manning's rookie season. And then in 2000, you have Tom Brady's championship ticket. That's probably the grail of all football cards. It's Contenders is the quarterback card, not NT. Contenders is the OG card. Don't let anybody tell you different. And that should be the brand you focus on for Patrick Mahomes, because the auto is on card. The card is vertical, not horizontal, which some card collectors hate because they can't store it. And the one thing about Patrick Mahomes' rookie year of Contenders, every card was a short print. Even the base was to 212 copies or less. I think it's much smarter to buy a PSA 9 Contenders rookie of Patrick Mahomes for $10,000 than pay a 13x for a BGS 9 NT of a patch that he never wore.
Tell him, Payne. Look at you. Who said I'm the card expert? What a great breakdown. Because I'm completely on board with you. I think that was a really good use of kind of the different brands that are in the space from someone's rookie year, right? And it's true. It's Contenders is the go-to for Peyton Manning, for Tom Brady, and yeah, Tom Brady's his championship Contenders is out of 100. I mean, it is if you see a Tom Brady card sell in the millions of dollars, it's because it's that card. I mean, that's just it. And so that brand, for the long term, is going to speak to collectors and investors. And if you want to talk about an ROI opportunity and potential, I love the Contenders brand, and I love it for, you don't have to worry. It doesn't have a jersey in there, so it's not an RPA, but it's an on-card auto. It's vertical. It's a gorgeous-looking card in general, and I really do love that card as a buy for sure.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think you sold a Contenders championship ticket of Patrick Mahomes semi-recently. I don't remember what it sold for. Do you know off the top of your head? But where I'm going with this comparison is Brady's the GOAT, always going to be the GOAT. But the championship ticket for Mahomes is out of 10. You mentioned the Brady out of 100. When I look at that comparison, Mahomes doesn't need 7 rings to kind of reach those prices. And I also think when we think about Mahomes as a quarterback and we think about the AFC landscape, look at all the quarterbacks he's had to go through. I am not taking anything away from Tom Brady, but some of the quarterbacks that he had to go through in his own division for about a decade. I'm a Dolphins fan. He was plowing through Jay Fiedler, okay? It wasn't anything dynamic. So I think collectors will start to realize that over time, that maybe this current quarterback crop that's in the AFC, we have to grade them on a little bit of a curve.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. And I think the Contenders you're referring to, was that the red zone variation, the dual PSA 10 that we had?
That is the one. Yeah, and that one's a short print, supposedly to 30 copies or less, even though it's not numbered.
So for me, this for those who know this card well, the autograph is usually pretty streaky in this card, and they not only graded the card a 10, but the autograph got a 10 auto as well, which is very, very difficult to find for this specific card. It did sell last month in a premier auction. It's only a population 2, so only 2 exist in what's called a dual PSA 10, the grade and the auto. Sold for about $60,000.
That's what I thought.
But you look at this. And that card's out of 35 we're talking about, right? Because it's a short print. We don't exactly know, but we believe it's about 35. And you look at his NT, which is out of 99. It's a horizontal card. It's got in my opinion, a pretty inferior patch. It is an on-card auto, but it's in a Beckett 9.5, and PSA 10s are worth more than Beckett 9.5s. So getting this card for just under $60,000 versus $130,000, which was the National Treasures out of 99, I would much rather have the Contenders Mahomes than the NT.
Absolute no-brainer.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. What do you think? I put you through the gauntlet. This was the first episode. I thought it flowed pretty well. For our loyal listeners out there, we're going to run 30 of these episodes for season 1. They're going to air on Tuesdays when they go live. Did you survive, Jesse Craig?
I thought this was a blast. I love talking about this stuff. I live and breathe cards. So, being able to finally get you on the air here, be able to give you some grief has been a good time.
Always good. Let's chat soon, bud.
Love it. Thanks, man.
Make sure you follow Payne on Twitter @Payne Insider. Subscribe to Bet the Board and get notified when new episodes of CardBoard Chat air on Tuesdays. And be sure to stop by PWCCmarketplace.com for all your collecting needs.